Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Mal Alcott, Mayor of Worcester, and I would just like to welcome everyone to the full council this evening. And we have the usual introduction. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. This evening, I would like to invite the Council to stand and observe 1 minute silence for past Mayor Derek Prodger, who passed away recently. Thank you. Please be seated. This evening, I would like to welcome the Very Reverend Dr. Stephen Edwards, Dean of Worcester, and I would like to invite him to say a few words and a few prayers for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the welcome and the invitation to be here. I've been in Worcester now for 6 years, actually. I arrived as a residentiary canon in 2019. I became Vice Dean and then Interim Dean, and now for the last 6 months I've been Dean, so I just keep on changing seats in the cathedral, basically. But what's really nice for me is, although I have said prayers in this chamber once before, I now recognise so many of the people sat around the tables in this room, and I feel well and truly a part of this city, which is a great joy for me. I came here from Manchester, and many of you will know the Manchester comedian Jason Manford, one of my favourites, and I can't tell jokes like he does, but he stood on stage and said that if you put a Mancunian in the room with someone from Liverpool, they become instant rivals. And it's usually about football, it could be about all sorts of things. But you throw into that room someone from Yorkshire, and suddenly the Mancunian and the Scouser become the best of friends. And it's what was Lancashire, though even now it's not Lancashire, is against Yorkshire. You throw in someone from London, and of course it gets worse, north and south, and so it goes on. And he ends the joke in a much better way than I could ever do by saying that the only way to get world peace is for someone to come from Mars and actually to criticise our biscuits. There is something very passionate about boundaries, about the place that we live. And yes, that's about maps, it's about the lines that are drawn, but it's also about the culture. It's the word we use for a bread roll, or it's where we do the big shop, it's where we go for a particular thing. It's the story that connects us together and roots us with the soil, with our ancestors, even if we've not lived there all our lives or our family have not been there. We feel that cultural resonance with a particular area. And so we get passionate about it. And I'm very aware that on your agenda this evening you'll be talking about the proposals for local government and unitary authorities, and this will be a topic of great passion, I'm sure, within this chamber, But of course, those watching online and those in the city and the wider area are also passionate about what that looks like because of that connection they have with space, because space and place are very important. I was brought up in North Wales. I'm a Shropshire lad by birth, but I was brought up in North Wales, and I remember my school books being stamped with Clwyd County Council. And when Clwyd County Council was abolished in the whatever it was, and it became Wrexham, it just wasn't the same. And I know that I felt a bit of me had been lost. Borders are important, yes, but culture and roots are equally important. And we know that some of those maps that are drawn with lines that have been abstract in the past have caused huge hurt. And we need to look at the politics of the news in terms of war and conflict at the moment internationally to know that whether it's Gaza or Ukraine, borders matter. And if we then think of all of the Holy Land, the Middle East, the wider area, and of course parts of Africa, the destruction by random lines is quite shocking. So I understand all of that. But I hope that the Jason Manford story might also allow us in some ways to think that it's what unites us that is more important than what divides us. It's been said 1,000 times before that it's become a cliche. But in this chamber tonight, I hope that when you are making those, if not decisions, those conversations and deliberations about the future of local government in this city and in this county, that you'll be very much aware that the young people of today will be the citizens of tomorrow who are dealing with the outcome of all of that. And so I hope that any decision that is made sets aside as much as is possible and practical some of our sentimental things about the past and looks to the future for a better future for all in this faithful city. Let us pray. Almighty Father, whose will is to restore all things in your beloved Son, govern the hearts and minds of those in authority in this city. Govern the hearts and minds of those in authority in this region and in this nation. And bring the families of the nations who are divided and torn apart to live together in unity and goodwill for the sake of peace and for the good of all people. We make this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much again, and please feel free to exit the meeting. No, you're very busy. Thank you. Okay, and if I can move on to apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Rudge.
Thank you. If you move on to, do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Barnes.
I work for Unison, and item 8 is going to have an enormous impact for a lot of members of Unison, so I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you. Councillor Gregson.
Yes, as an employee of County Council in relation to item 8.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
Yeah, also for item 8, my wife is an employee of Worcester County Council at the Hive.
Thank you. Any further? No. Okay, if we move on to the minutes. We have two sets. We have the 18th and the 25th of Feb. Is everyone content that they are a true and accurate record? Agreed? Agreed. And any matters arising? Okay, thank you. I'll move on to agenda item 4, Mayor's Communications. And we start with the late Derek Podger. Derek served for many years as both a city and county councillor. Born and raised in Worcester, Derek was first elected as a city councillor for the Conservatives in 1982. He represented the Bedwardine ward for an unbroken spell of 34 years before standing down in May 2016. During his time at the City Council, he served as chairman of the Leisure Services Committee and the Planning Committee and was cabinet member for Clean, Green and Safe City. He was mayor in 1998-99, and one of the highlights of his mayoral year was twinning Worcester with its American counterpart, Worcester, Massachusetts. He was made an honorary alderman of the council in 2016. Derek was also a county councillor for many years and was chairman of the former Hereford and Worcester County Council for 2 years in the mid-90s. In addition, he spent 6 years as chairman of Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue Authority from 2011 to 2017. Derek, who ran his own painting and construction business locally for many years until retirement, stood down from politics in 2017, having suffered a heart attack the previous year. He was awarded an MBE in 2000 for his work on the South West Midlands War Pensions Committee. His passion for horse racing was well known, and for many years he represented the council as a director of Worcester Racecourse. And I would like to invite members to speak. And I believe Councillor Gregson, you had to, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes. When I joined the council in 1992, Derek had already been on the city for a decade and was a household name. And in those pre-cabinet days, he was primarily involved with the leisure and planning committees. Leisure especially due to its supervision of racing at Pitchcroft, of which he was especially partial. This was in the days, of course, when being a member of the Leisure Services Committee, as I was, brought with it a ticket to all our race meetings. Though Derek took his racing further afield too, not least, of course, later as the director of the racecourse and a city rep on the contract board. In the early 90s, Labour held chairs of committees, but when that changed, Derek took on the chair of Leisure Services and also in planning. However, he fully recognised the work that had been done, for instance, in developing the Soldier Gallery, and he helped ensure that as an immediate past chairman of museums, I was invited to meet Princess Anne when she opened a new gallery in 2003, and the photographs sat on my parents' mantelpiece for many years, just with Derek blotted out a bit at the edge. Another occasion, he was very generous to me when I had slightly miscalculated my alcohol intake at a banquet, and he kindly let me sit quietly in the parlour with a large glass of red to bring me back to my senses. As one of my predecessors as mayor, he reopened those links with Worcester Mass that had been dormant for many years. And though they remain intermittent, I do share the privilege with him and a few others of being civic representatives to have actually visited the American town. And as a county councillor, of course, I knew him as an employee, and he showed a genuine interest in the archives and heritage of the city, especially at a time when there were questions about the ownership of Pitchcroft, and his love of racing was threatened, and I sat him down in St Helens Record Office with a large box of 18th century deeds for him to plough through. After his own service in the RAF and work on the War Pensions Board, it is not surprising he was also supportive of the First World War Centenary Project, in particular, and maybe surprisingly, the Vamos Theatre production linking Vesta Tilley and Worcester in the First World War. When he became a City Cabinet member for Clean and Green, he championed the use of electric vehicles in the cleansing round and the High Street. And I think it was only right that we acknowledged his contribution to the city, along with other stalwarts of the 80s and 90s, Robert Roden, Cliff Lord and Jeff Carpenter, with the revival of the Alderman accolade in 2016. And I'm sure he will be remembered in our annals when someone comes to write them and ask who all those people were in the photographs that adorn the council chamber. I got through that whole tribute without mentioning Diglis Bridge.
Councillor Gregson, thank you. I think, do we have any more speakers? Thank you. If we move on to, obviously we've got the spring conference coming up, so please make a note in your diaries for the, not conference, it's clearly on my mind, it's concert, for the charity spring concert by Worcester Concert Brass on Friday the 4th of April. Also we have the charity banquet, it's coming up soon now, it's on the 28th of March, it's Pride and Prejudice themed, and there are still some tickets available, and I think Jill's happy to slot a few people in if they want to later. And also after the meeting we have refreshments, and they're in the Mayor's Parlour, and they are all in the Mayor's Parlour this evening, so we're all together, and yes, Well, that's all. But yeah, so if we move on to item 5, public participation. This evening we have one member of the public to speak, and that's Mr. Francis Lancaster. And as you know, you have up to 5 minutes to speak, and Claire will time it for you. So please continue when you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. Notices of motion at full council, I understand, are popular because it allows councillors to raise issues that they care about and put them into the committee system, where they are subject to report and scrutiny. Crucially, you make decisions on the smallest local detail with a report from professional officers, the ability to question them, add your knowledge, and if necessary, postpone for further consideration. But there is an exception when in full council, you pass a resolution straight into policy without a report or further scrutiny. I want to raise in particular 3. Firstly, the anti-Semitism definition and policy, which refers to equal or unequal treatment of the Israeli state. This was your policy when you discussed Gaza. If it was discussed in committee, relevant policies would be part of the report. But of course, in notices of motion here, there is no report. Secondly, there is a reference to intent, but a mechanism to identify how that might be decided. The second is the definition and policy on Islamophobia. Everybody knows this is one of our most controversial and divisive issues. There is a large literature, probably about 3,000 publications, of which I personally reviewed about 10% and published. 30 minutes discussion, including the proposer and seconder's speeches, with no briefing report, for an issue which is so controversial with so many ambiguities, I would submit is not sufficient. In addition, Council arguably jumped the gun as the government has not adopted any policy, and it's well known that the APPG definition is the most controversial one on the books. The policy is a minefield and can come back to bite. And so to Gaza. I quote the council leader, "Words matter. Particular words in particular places have a big effect." And this is very true. Palestine, occupation, apartheid, genocide. These have meanings and they are contested. There was no report, no historical context, no contemporary context. One councillor, in discussing genocide, did so in detail, but nobody else. The motion was additionally badly drafted because it was noticed at the last minute, although there were plenty of accusations of genocide, it wasn't clear who this referred to. Memo to motion drafters: don't cut and paste. This is what student politicians do. Regarding the content of the main motion and the amendment, they were very similar, except in one significant respect. I viewed the recording of the debate several times. It isn't clear, did the councillors who voted down the amendment realize, plus the mayor, the then mayor who gave his casting vote, incidentally not noted in the minutes, did they realize that on our behalf, they effectively condoned hostage taking, including of British citizens? Regarding the quality of the debate, I would ask you to look at the recording and decide whether there was an appeal to evidence or an appeal to authority. Furthermore, to watch where do you think that there was calm consideration of the evidence, or did it effectively constitute performative virtue signalling? So I would ask the council leader to firstly work with officers to ensure there's a protocol that where council promotes a new policy or action, unless time is of the essence, it is directed to the appropriate committee for proper informed scrutiny. Secondly, to revisit the anti-Semitism and Islamophobia policies and find a way to subject them to proper detailed scrutiny. Regarding Gaza, events have moved on. Successive mayors and council leaders have promoted Worcester as united and as against causing division. This council is the guardian of our city's reputation. It has wide latitude to discuss matters on our city's behalf. But just because you can do something does not mean that you must. Since 1945, nearly 14 million Muslims have been killed in violent conflicts, the vast majority by other Muslims. But this council and other councils have concentrated on the one involving the Jews. There is war, famine, and genocide in Sudan, Somalia, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, the African Great Lakes around Congo. Millions have died. 100,000 starved to death deliberately by the Ethiopian government in Tigray. These are some of the poorest nations in the world, but nobody cares.
Lancaster, sorry, could I just get you to just wrap up, just because we're just coming up, well, we're at full time. Order, Councillor Riaz, sorry, if we just let Mr Lancaster just sum up.
Sorry, I didn't hear how long you said.
1 more minute. 1 more minute. Thank you.
Currently, in the Sudan, the RSF, supported by the United Arab Emirates with modern weapons, is massacring thousands of African Darfuris. Where are the council resolutions? Where are the demonstrations, the encampments, the murals? There are none. We have closer diplomatic economic relations with the UAE than with Israel. To conclude, some of you know that I used to be a teacher. Though I listened with interest to a video from Gaza before the war, where school children were asked what they thought of the Israelis. Each of them replied with the usual anti-Semitic stereotypes. One particular child caught my attention. She was a girl, maybe 9 or 10, the same age as the one on the Lowesmore mural. She said, "At school, they teach us to hate the Jews. I want to stab them."
Please,
Listening
I need
to
order.
and a mountain of evidence, when speaking on behalf of all the residents of our city,
Order, Mr.
councillors should know
Order,
what is the
Mr.
correct
Lancaster.
moral path to follow. And I will remind
Ms.
Councillor
Lancaster, your
Riaz,
time is more than up. Thank you. I will ensure you receive a written response. You can stay for the remainder of the meeting, but we have let you go over, so I do need to ask you to stop now. Thank you.
you ought to show a member of the public respect. No. Show some respect. And in fact, I would praise the Labour Party for raising the amendment, at least you did that.
Okay, thank you. And as I said, I will ensure a written response is received. So if we move on to agenda item 6, on to questions. And the first question is from Councillor Kimberley, and it's to Councillor Denham. Thank you, Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservative West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner, John Campion, has lately announced his decision to cut 150 jobs from the force, despite receiving a £180.9 million grant from the new Labour government. Somehow, his office costs have increased by £2.8 million over the same period. As representatives in Warmden and Elbury Park, my colleagues and I are constantly confronted by the realities of life in an area where the police are under-resourced and understaffed. As leader of the council, would you agree that this situation is unacceptable, Councillor Denham? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimberley. It is shocking that the office costs for the Police and Crime Commissioner should have gone up by so much. I don't know how many deputy or assistant commissioners he now has and whether these are in any way contributing to it. The idea of the Labour government giving additional grant, and in fact the Police and Crime Commissioner can raise council tax unrestricted. He actually receives more council tax for policing than this city council receives to provide all our services, to know that this is actually going to be a reduction in frontline policing. I don't think it's acceptable. It's not easy to hold the Commissioner to account. There is a committee so to do. And you also give me the opportunity to absolutely value our neighbourhood policing teams. They do a fantastic job in many neighbourhoods across the city. And I really, really hope that we don't lose any of them.
Councillor Kimberley, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Madam Mayor. Colleagues will recall that last year Councillor Sarah Murray proposed and I seconded a motion calling for a cross-party push to lobby for the funds needed to rescue the much-loved and much-needed Dawn project. It is a project that saves lives and supports the victims of domestic abuse. I'm therefore very disappointed to hear that West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner John Campion has rejected our plea, instead going for a one-size-fits-all programme to cover the whole of West Mercia. Would the Leader of the Council agree with me that this is a tragic waste of local resources, expertise and relationships which are so essential for this kind of advocacy to actually work? Thank you.
Thank you. I think many of us have seen the value of the Dawn project, have actually seen it in operation over a number of years, and it's been absolutely life-changing for victims of domestic abuse. It started within Worcester City and has, I don't know the timescale, in more recent years actually been provided across South Worcestershire. I think we were all hugely disappointed to hear recently that the Police and Crime Commissioner has chosen not to use any of his funding to support the Dawn project going forwards, as you say, despite sort of lobbying on our part and on the part of others. I understand that the Public Health are looking to commission a service with a similar specification to the Dawn project, and I guess also a plea that there is currently a crowdfunding in place. If people are able to give any funding towards that, it closes at the end of this week. Any funding will actually be matched by, I've forgotten the name of I think it's an insurance company who have an interest, so they're prepared to match up to £250 per donation because they understand and realise the massive impact that domestic abuse can have, particularly on the financial stability of families. So I know and I hope that colleagues will do our best to continue to support Dawn, but very disappointed that the Police and Crime Commissioner doesn't see its value.
Councillor Denham, thank you. Next we have a question from Councillor Lawrenson for Councillor Denham. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. At last month's Health and Wellbeing Committee meeting, I expressed concerns about a 96% reduction in household support fund referrals from the Citizens Advice Bureau. What effects do you think the government's proposed cuts to disability benefits will have on the household support fund and the council and CAB's ability to help people who need support?
Thank you for the question, which obviously due to our constitutional timeframes was drafted last week. There has been much rumour and speculation about the government's intentions, and I think it's really sad that that speculation and rumour has been whipped up and actually caused fear and anxiety to many people with disabilities. I have the advantage today in two significant updates. So the government today announced the Pathways to Work Green Paper. This government inherited a broken social security system. and wants to do everything possible to actually to enable and support those who can work to do so whilst protecting those who cannot. The aim is to put social security spending on a fairer, more sustainable footing and making the system fit for today and fit for generations to come, and to actually unlock growth as part of the overall government's plan for change and enabling more people to live more fulfilled lives. The other update today is that we have received from the County Council what the allocation of the Household Support Fund will be for the financial year that's about to start.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you for the response to my initial question, Councillor Denham. My supplementary is as follows. The government, there's a bit of a preamble, then there is a genuine question at the end. The government has already cut the winter fuel allowance and kept the two-child benefit cap, meaning that thousands of people are living in poverty. 16 charities, including Mind, Disability Rights UK and Citizens Advice, have written to the Chancellor to express concerns that disability benefit cuts could push a further 700,000 households into poverty. The Chief Executive of Scope said today that the government is, and I quote, choosing to penalise some of the poorest people in our society. So my question is this. Do you, as leader of this council, support the cuts to disability benefits? Thank you.
I'm not aware of cuts to disability benefits. What, as leader of this council and as a Labour councillor over a number of years, I've fought hard and made sure that this council has a discretionary welfare assistance scheme, which is considerably more generous and actually is in place when other local authorities don't, that we do have a council tax support scheme and use of the household support fund. So absolutely everything that this council is able to deliver to ensure that people within residents of Worcester City don't go hungry and don't go cold.
And final question, we have Councillor Amos with a question for Councillor Denham. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Given that one of the main duties of the council is to keep our streets clean and safe, Lower Wycombe Pitmarston Ward has one of the highest proportion of dog walkers, the vast majority of whom are considerate, responsible and sensible people. But a tiny minority do not clean up after their walk and cause a significant and persistent problem of dog fouling, such that, for example, the footpath between Winchester Avenue and Pitmarston Road is known as Dog Poo Alley and is on one of the main routes for Pitmarston Primary School children. So will she, as a priority, review the arrangements for enforcement and education to deal with this dangerous and antisocial behaviour problem?
Thank you, Councillor Amos. This sounds like a permutation of the question that you asked me at the last council. So, civil enforcement officers will undertake enforcement visits across the whole of the city, and if there are particular hotspot locations, they will do so if those are brought to their attention. Obviously, it's difficult to witness such offences, to catch the dog or the owner in the act. In terms of education, during the end of February, the council raised the profile of the Any Bin Will Do campaign, and there was also a very significant social media campaign, which maybe Councillor Amos is not fully aware of, around dog poo and encouraging, reminding owners to pick up.
Councillor Amos, you have a supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll do a brief supplementary. I thank Councillor Denham for her answer, and she's quite right. I have raised this before, but it's an ongoing issue, so obviously I will raise it again and again. But would she agree that innovations, such as, for example, the provision of dog bag dispensers strategically placed, collating data on the worst affected areas so that the council can concentrate its resources accordingly, and provide more litter bins would help to address this ongoing problem.
I don't know the specifics of the where the litter bins are within the area that you're looking at, but part of the any bin will do is that dog mess can be put in a black bin. It doesn't have to be in the dog poo bins. I think, you know, here and now in a response to a question is not, I'm not going to make up policy or to make changes to in response to a question. Using the City Council's Report It system, if all incidences and problems are reported, that then enables the council to actually map and to see the hotspots. So absolutely encourage people to report and use the existing systems.
Thank you. We can now, well, next we have item 7, notice of motion, but we actually have no notice of motion. So moving swiftly on to item 8, and this is the English Devolution White Paper, submission of an interim plan for local government reorganisation in Worcestershire, and it is being proposed by Councillor Denham. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, I'm just reshuffling papers and reshuffling brain. We have in front of us, I haven't prepared a speech for this, the interim plan for local government reorganisation in Worcestershire. So this is to be submitted by the end of this week, in line with the letter from the Minister that was received by all leaders, council leaders within Worcestershire on the 5th of February. And what the department are looking for is a progress report and an update on where discussions have got to with regard to the English Devolution Bill and to moving from two-tier local authorities towards unitary authorities. We had a really good debate at our special council meeting on the 11th of February, and I'm kind of grateful for all councillors that contributed that, and I think, you know, that enabled us to set out very clearly what our values and our preferences and priorities would be going forwards. The interim plan that we have as the appendix may look a little disappointing. It is the agreement, it's the agreed policy between all 7 local council leaders in Worcestershire. You could say it's a lowest common denominator. I think that might be a little unfair. It very clearly puts on the table, tells the Minister MH and the Department MHCLG that 2 options on the table. And I think, you know, it's useful to note what the points of agreement are. So we are looking within the boundary of Worcestershire and looking at district councils within that, not to sort of adjust boundaries or, you know, different options and negotiations, which, you know, in some areas, in some counties is happening. So the options are for 1 Worcestershire, which is the preference of the county council, or for a North Worcestershire unitary and a South Worcestershire unitary. And the paper tells Whitehall where we are, which you can't guarantee that the civil servants realise exactly where we are, and who our neighbours are, which is important. It's got some basic data and amounts within that. guess colleagues may well be aware that. So the aim is that this document, this interim plan, goes through all 7 councils in some fashion and is submitted to the department. The county council are almost certainly putting in their own parallel plan, or at least the report that's been prepared for them by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and that attempts to make the case for One Worcestershire. Having been at the scrutiny committee today, that paper has not been discussed with district council leaders. We only saw it when it was published as a report by the county council for scrutiny. There are some Herculean assumptions and some odd assumptions within it. It's based on an identikit model that PwC are applying all around England, to be honest, and they actually kind of put out a proposal that for all of the added together for all the remaining county council areas, showing a couple of big numbers, and that county councils, surprise, surprise, are the right template and the right size. This is the next stage in a process, and it misses out a number of the criteria and much of the guidance, but discussions, negotiations, conversations will be taking place after the end of March.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And we have Councillor Holmes to second.
Thank you, Chair. On the 11th of February, this council held a dedicated extraordinary meeting and debated our collective response to the local government minister's letter, inviting the 2-tier local authorities to develop an interim plan for our preferred choice of unitary. The 11th of February, not the 11th hour, as some local authorities have left this important matter. We have held extra meetings, debated and rescheduled the city's civic calendar to accommodate this decision, and this letter is the first formal step towards restructure. Hopefully the Minister will recognise that the power of local governance belongs with the local people, and that we as their elected representatives have been entrusted to carry out this process, and we will be actively listening to our residents. Worcester City Council members have a preferred option, which is to form 2 unitary councils, North and South Worcestershire. Worcester City favours combining with Malvern Hills District Council and Wychavon District Council, following the existing lines of collaboration and shared services. We have a lot of ground to cover in a very short timescale, but I am confident that this City Council will consult with the residents, debate and deliberate our full submission in good time for November. So I'm urging you to please support this interim plan.
Councillor Holmes, thank you. Before I ask for speakers, I would just like to comment today. I was at overview and scrutiny at the County Council, and so was Councillor Cross, Councillor Denham and myself, so it was nice to see cross-party support for Worcester at the County Scrutiny Committee. But I think, Councillor Cross, you've indicated you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, please. First of all, within our agenda pack today, do we have updates from how Bromsgrove and Redditch resolved to decide how to go forward in the meetings of 12th of March and 17th of March, please? And yeah, separately, I really recommend everybody download and read the agenda from the Overview and Scrutiny Performance Board today. You don't have to read all how many hundreds of pages, but page 6 of that report, basically the County Council Cabinet will be meeting on the 20th of March, and they say that basically if a preferred option is not determined at this stage, they'll have to evaluate more than one option through a full business case, which would cost more money and potentially abortive work. It's estimated the cost of external support and advice to formulate a business case for each option will be around £500,000. This risk will be mitigated by Cabinet endorsing the preferred option. Should other councils individually or collectively choose to develop proposals, this will be at their own cost. That's what counties say. I would strongly urge all members to have eyes on what our county council are doing, because they're not telling us necessarily without us asking. Thank you.
Councillor Cross, thank you. David, would you like just to respond to Redditch and Bromsgrove? Because obviously it's not minuted yet, just so everyone's got an update. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you. My understanding is that both Redditch and Bromsgrove have agreed the report that you see before you this evening, and Malvern Hills are meeting tonight at the same time as us. So that's an update. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Riaz.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's really important to highlight why we kind of our preferred option is the South Worcestershire option in the sense that what we decided at the last extraordinary meeting, just so that the members of the public and councillors are aware. So, I mean, the key advantages of this South Worcestershire plan are sort of on 5 points. Firstly, stronger strategic planning and economic growth. South Worcestershire Council already collaborate on a number of issues, including key infrastructure planning and economic policies. We've got the Worcestershire Parkway, we've got possibly 10,000 homes outlined in that growth region in terms of that, so we can demonstrate in any test of plan that we've got the growth to go along with it. A unitary authority will also strengthen those partnerships and drive focused regional growth in terms of that. 2, better representation and local identity, which is really, really important for us. South Worcestershire has a distinct character. We have obviously Worcester as the main urban hub, Malvern Hills and Witch Haven, which are a good offering of a mix of a rural and market town type of governance. So, you know, that key distinct feature within the South Worcestershire area offers the distinct local balance of small and market towns and that distinct governance model. Effective service delivery, I think, is really, really important. South Worcestershire councils already operate joint service arrangements. Consolidating those into a single unitary council would streamline the administration and enhance the efficiency of that. And a north-south split maintains existing service networks and avoiding disruption that the county-wide model might introduce as a result. Number 4, balanced population, and we've all talked about this Price Waterhouse magic figure of 500,000, which seems to be being spouted about as the ideal amount of efficiencies. But the South Worcestershire, we're about 323. It aligns well with established unitary authorities in neighbouring areas and ensuring effective governance, so without excessive bureaucracy. So we have a ready-made model to give to government, a working model to give to government without much disruption. And 5, flexibility on devolution. A South Worcestershire model would give greater alignment with economic and transport partnerships and making it a stronger candidate for devolution compared to a county-wide model. And the structure allows for differentiated devolution pathways if required, avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach. So in conclusion, Madam Mayor, the first South Worcestershire unitary model that we've talked about is probably the best governance solution by balancing local identity, efficient service delivery and strategic growth potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Cookson.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this item, but there's just a few things I wanted to say. I'm not at all disappointed with this report, and actually what I really wanted to do is to thank the officers that wrote it, to say thank you for what I think is a really strong report. And there's some things that I think are particularly important in this report, and that's that it really highlights the good work that we do across Worcestershire, that we do work with our county in partnership, that we, as a current 2-tier, that we do things across South Worcestershire, and there's a lot of good practice that's already going on across South Worcestershire. And I really like the fact that the report acknowledged that and recognised that we did not ask for this. We might be looking to how this then, given what we're required to do, is the best fit for Worcester, but nowhere in Worcestershire was anybody looking for this. I also really like the realism in this about the cost savings that's going to be associated with any reorganisation. We are right down to the bone as local authorities across the county. I think we work very efficiently. There are going to be limited efficiencies that we can make going forward. And I also very much value the fact that this recognises the costs that are associated, both with the sort of practical things of just the logistics of this, but then there's going to be the whole other things that are going to be, we're going to have to rebrand all the bin lorries, we're going to have to change all the labels. It is going to cost a lot of money. So I just really wanted to value, while recognising we are going forward, and given that we have to go forward, I do agree with Councillor Rios that South Worcestershire is probably the best option, but I think this report is really strong, and I do think it fairly reflects where we are as in Worcestershire, and I wanted to thank the officers, and I don't know who wrote it, but I actually think it's a really good report.
Thank you. I think Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Cookson's kind of stolen my lines there. So I was going to say thank you to the officers for facilitating the discussions and conveying the outcomes of those discussions so clearly in the meeting papers. You know, we're looking at the biggest reorganisation of local government in 50 years, and you've captured that timeline really in simple terms for someone like me to understand. So thank you so much. I just want to make another point and end with a question about how we move forward. So on page 8 of the appendix, it says that the 7 principal councils in Worcestershire have a record of working together positively, which I think is broadly correct. However, the cover report says on page 3, under point 3.5, Worcestershire County Council has commissioned PricewaterhouseCoopers to advise them on the likely costs and savings associated with the 2 models being considered. District councils were unable to contribute to the PricewaterhouseCoopers brief, and this was not shared with the district councils prior to the commission. So therefore, how can we ensure that Worcestershire County Council does actually work with this council and other district councils on the final plan submission between now and November when we have to hand it in? Thank you.
Councillor Lawrenson, thank you. I think that's a very valid question, and having been at OSPB today, but I think as a council we should do all we can to lobby and ensure we get the best result from our members. Thank you. We've got Councillor Kimberley next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The evidence of many, many conversations with local people all across Worcester, I think, underlines one very clear point, which is that people want local government that is truly local. And a South Worcestershire unitary would strike an elegant balance between achieving the benefits and efficiencies of scale while respecting the cultural identities of our communities. We share a great deal with Malvern and with Wychavon. I don't think you can put a price tag on the value of knowing who your council is, who your councillor is, and what they do for you, and the services that your council provides for you. I would only ask, following on from that, on what basis the County Council proposes to lecture us or anyone else about saving money given their financial state. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 points, if I may. 3.5, we're told that the districts haven't been involved with the how the modelling has been done by the County Council. I think it's rather disappointing and depressing, but entirely predictable, unfortunately, that they are not willing, it would appear, to involve the districts at this stage. So the first question is, could we have some indication of what the assumptions are that the county has used for its modelling? Because you can rest assured the assumptions they've given are designed to come up with the answer they want. And the second question is, and it may be too early, but I can't see any particular detail in the report. But in fact, although technically it isn't, but in fact, the County Council is bankrupt after 14 years of Simon Gerrit's and Mark Bayliss' leadership. And bankruptcy means that income cannot cover their expenditure. This year, the council is bankrupt by 35 million, expected to go up to 55 million next year. Unfortunately, the council has been given dispensation to sell off its assets more quickly to cover this debt. So what concerns me, Mayor, is clearly the county council would have an interest, would it not, in having a unitary as big as possible so that it can nick as many councils' reserves as possible to cover this debt, at least in the short term, and to flog off as many of other people's assets as it can possibly do. And that is my concern as to why I want to know what assumptions they have put into this modelling to come up with an answer, which is that the best way forward is to have one unitary because they can nick more people's reserves and flog off more other people's assets.
Councillor Amos, thank you. I think, unfortunately, it's not in our gift to answer that, but I would encourage others to contact County. Yeah, but certainly feel free to lobby people as you want to. Yeah, and so can I move on to Councillor Barnes? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Both proposals will lead to a reduction in centralisation of jobs. 7 centres either to 1 centre or 2 centres, depending which way it ends up. I think we need to learn lessons from the civil service. People may remember the tax office closing most places in the country, actually, not just Worcester, and how jobs were lost. And it wasn't just jobs, but it was everything else around it. But they were local jobs, and local people now have to travel, if they stay in the civil service, to Birmingham if they want a job. And that is a very sad state of affairs. Also, when those jobs went, so did a lot of local influence. For example, civil servants, and in fact, local government workers tend to be people who volunteer for things. They actually do things in their communities. It's just, they join local or national government because they have that particular mindset. So even down to signing passports, there are less people who can sign your passport now in Worcester because the jobs have gone and people have moved to the job. So the whole idea of centralisation in those ways means it can, I was going to say enrich community, it's the opposite of that. It's actually taking away from communities. It's causing more remoteness, longer travel for staff, and possibly less access to local democracy. It is a possible also risk to local services because as you do that, the further you are away from the people you're trying to serve, the less likely you are to know about it. So obviously the smaller the new version, the better probably. And obviously a large county council versus 2 smaller councils, you can draw your own conclusions. We do need to be really careful now and make slow, careful considerations rather than jump, as the county council did, into an immediate response, because I think it's far too important both for citizens and also all council members, all council employees, not just in Worcester City, but across the whole of Worcestershire. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes, thank you. And Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to pick up on something that was just been sort of mentioned by Councillor Barnes. And my concern is a democratic deficit that I think is being created by some of the proposals, both locally and nationally. I mean, obviously, part of the whole point about this change is to sort of improve things. But to be honest with you, all this change that's proposed, I don't think it will deliver a single new affordable home. It won't create an additional police officer or fill a single additional pothole in the road. And any savings seem to come from getting rid of councillors and vague economies of scale. And what's really interesting, when you actually look at polls, you know, people like their local councillors and they like their local council more than they like their local MP. You know, so perhaps we should ask the House of Commons to reduce its numbers and perhaps we can make some savings there. And when you actually compare us nationally, we have fewer elected representatives than almost any other comparable Western democracy. You know, we've got 19,000 councillors in this country. Now, the French have 36,000 councils, not councillors, councils. Now, I'm not saying we go quite that far, but when you put it in context, back in the 1960s, we had 75,000 councillors in the United Kingdom. If you follow these proposals, we'll only have 14,000 left to represent a population of almost 70 million. And I'm really concerned about this because when you actually look at the proposals whereby we'll either have 114 members across a unitary authority or 60 members for South Worcestershire, you start to come into this situation where this becomes almost a full-time job. And once it becomes a full-time job, and you know this sort of almost fits in with the governance review as well. Once it becomes a full-time job where meetings are during the day, where you're paid 12, 13 grand, and it becomes like a full-time job, that automatically then precludes certain people from becoming councillors. You know, part of the reason we're councillors, you know, is I have a full-time job, I combine it with a council because we meet in the evenings. So I'm worried about the lack of councillors, and it's almost in the white paper and in the local report. There's almost a virtue being made that we'll have fewer local politicians. Well, that hardly encourages political engagement. So I'm just very concerned that we're going to have less councillors doing more, but you won't have any kind of actually better services. So there's a lot of concerns here, which I think I expressed last time. And whilst it is a good report, I'm not convinced that anything I've read here has changed my mind, to be honest with you.
Councillor Lamb, thank you. Councillor Lewing.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you to Matt and Jenny for what you've both just said. I'm concerned about a couple of things, but I mean, there's one aspect that I'm quite looking forward to is having some control over our highways, which, you know, half the time we don't know what's going on. You know, taking active travel seriously would be nice. But I am really concerned about lack of representation. I think, you know, going down, I'm thinking of the division where I am, which would be the St Stephen's division. We have 5 councillors at the moment covering that division, and it would end up being 2. And we've got some full-time councillors actually who do and know their residents extremely well. We know the area extremely well. And what I'm worried about is on a allowance of £12,000, you're not going to get as much choice of quality of councillors. That's what I'm worried about. People who care about it for the right reasons and who want to do this job because they truly care about their local community. So, you know, the idea that there are 60 members across the whole of southern Worcestershire, where it takes you such a long time actually to get to the far eastern corner of Wychavon and the bottom of Malvern, I just don't see how that's going to work for our residents at all, and that's one of my main concerns. So it's about, you know, having the right councillors actually who want to do this, who can financially do this. You know, how many people can afford to live on £12,000 a year? You know, with cost and inflation, I think, you know, loads of people can't, and wouldn't expect us to. You know, lots of people think we're on a proper wage now. You know, they don't realise that we don't get a pension as part of our councillor allowance. If it's going to take up how much time, you're not going to get women who haven't got loads of money in their pensions being able to afford to do this. You have time off to have children, you haven't invested, you've got gaps in your state pension. It's really difficult, and there are other reasons why also people can't do it. So those are my concerns. Highways, yes please. Everything else, I'm worried. Oh, one more thing, member champions. What a brilliant job we have of our member champions. Can we please, whatever unitary council we have, still maintain member champions that are local to the area? Because that knowledge and the work that our member champions do cannot be lost. It's not on. Thank you.
Councillor Lewin, thank you. And Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Mayor. My points were actually made very well by the previous 2 contributions. I was going to refer to Section 6 on electoral arrangements and suggest that where it says a simple solution, it seems a very glib phrase in terms of what one option is to have the 2 councillors per divisions, and for something that is so important to this whole area of work, perhaps that area of the report could do with a little bit more focus on this really important area. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnersley, thank you. Councillor Agar.
Thank you. I thought I wasn't going to speak at all today because I've already indicated, I think, the importance that I attach to the fact that South Worcestershire has worked together so successfully over the last 12 or more years on the development plan. So the broad consensus that we've developed, which is evidence-based, has been enormously useful, I think, in knitting us together as much as anything. So I think we really can work together. But I really wanted to talk about just two matters of detail. One was transport. And I remember being told by a dinosaur, I suppose, of a county councillor, I won't tell you who it was, that we didn't really need the bus services that I was suggesting, and that we could always get a lift when we wanted one, couldn't we? Well, I said, no, we jolly well couldn't, and I think that we shouldn't have to, that we actually need a transport system fit for the future. I still think that, and I'd love to get my hands on transport. I think most of us would, because when the Bus Services Act was passed, I challenged Simon Geraghty to go for franchising. He wouldn't do it. That was the best of three options. He went for the least, which is an enhanced partnership, which does very little. He seemed to think that they weren't capable of doing it and it would be too expensive to do any more. But I think that we deserve better, that the residents of this city and this region deserve better, and it's time we got better. So I do hope they'll be listening to us on such issues. And the other thing is, you mentioned, Councillor Lewing, quite rightly, that this will be a full-time job, but I doubt if they're going to pay full-time wages. And if I remember correctly, about a decade ago, Wolverhampton unitary councillors were being paid about 16,500. That was it. It would cost a great deal more for somebody to leave a decent job nowadays. And I can't see a proper age range of councillors being able to do that job if that's all they're going to get for almost a full-time commitment. Thank you.
Councillor Agar, thank you. Councillor Mays.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to the officers and the leaders who have been involved in putting this together. I just want to make a brief point that I know the whole thing about the £500,000 threshold is that it's to be a sustainable council of that size. And I think the county council shows very well that a council of that size is not necessarily sustainable. And I think the key point is that whatever size we end up with, government needs to properly fund local government. As we've already heard, councillors tend to be more popular than their MPs, and we need the funding to be able to deliver the services no matter what council we end up with. So that needs to be the way forward. And I'm just worried with things that we hear, like that the government expects us to meet transition costs from our existing budgets. That our existing budgets are already pushed. We're already pressed. They need to fund councils properly to be able to deliver the services and the growth we want to see.
Thank you. And Councillor De Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wondered is there an opportunity or an option to review the number of councillors that are going to be suggested for the new South Worcestershire, North-South Worcestershire divide? Because it seems like I would have to agree with the other members who have spoken. That doesn't seem to me like it's enough members if we're going to do the job properly, especially wage who might need it.
Sarah, thank you. David, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that this is very much a update in terms of where we've got to. The government has made it very clear that anything we put in now or by the end of this week is not binding. When we get to the 28th of November, when we have to make our final proposal, it may look very, very different to what we put in at this moment. This is just almost where our thinking has got to so far. So I think it's fair to say, well, I wouldn't be overly concerned at this stage in terms of where we are. We've got it will go very quickly, but we have got another few months to put together our final proposal. If I may just add, because I know it's a hot topic, with regard to the size, the leader and I were at the District Council Network conference last week, and Jim McMahon, the Minister, spoke, and he made it very clear that despite what you see in some of the press, that 500,000 population is a statutory minimum, he made it very clear that is not the case. He made it clear that he wouldn't be drawn on the best outcome, because that is for local councillors to determine. But he did say that 500,000 may end up being the average. There might be council propositions coming forward for 300, 350. There might be some for 600, 700. So I think it's just worth mentioning that, because the notion that the government have made it very clear that 500,000 is an absolute minimum is clearly not the case. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, Councillor Cross, you did indicate to speak again, but unfortunately you've spoken once already, and under the rules of the Constitution it is just once for every speaker. So can I ask, do we have any other speakers? Councillor Jagger, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As many of you know, I'm currently on maternity leave, but I've chosen to be here so I could participate in this debate. I'm very proud to be part of this council because of some of the decisions that it's made that enabled me to be a councillor and also have a family. And I'm worried about how these policies, which were very progressive, very supportive, will translate as we move on to the Unitary Council, whether we will have to start from scratch. Thank you.
Councillor Jagger, thank you. I think any more speakers? No. Okay. Councillor Denham, if you'd like to sum up. Thank you. Oh, apologies. Councillor Pingree? Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm mostly asking a question that Andrew wants to ask, just to confirm what he asked earlier, which was he asked about Redditch and Bromsgrove councils, because they've had their meeting. It's not in the paperwork, it said to be confirmed. Did they decide for option A or B, or did they just say we'd like to look at both options?
They have agreed the interim proposal as it's submitted now. So I think they are keeping both options on the table at the moment.
Yeah, I think to add to that OSPB today, whilst the minutes will be out, but very informally, that they said they were open to both options. But obviously, please do check with the minutes for the exact detail.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Denham, if you'd like to sum up, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all colleagues for your contributions. The way ahead is not an easy one. I absolutely hear and share many of the concerns. To kind of respond to a couple of the specific questions, the PwC model actually doesn't contain assumptions based on Worcestershire. That is the whole problem with the model. It was originally developed actually prior to COVID. There's a well-known paper that the County Council Network published in 2020, which made assumptions about savings if you had large councils, which, you know, that's been disputed. They've updated that national model, if you like to put it that way. So, you know, within the papers for overview, county councils overview, and you can see the whole of the PwC report that they're looking to submit, and it's also on the papers for their county council cabinet meeting on Thursday. The assumptions are national ones. So I asked at the scrutiny committee about a couple of them. I mean, one, it's only a very small example, but it's illustrative. It assumes savings from having fewer elections, which fair enough if you're not electing to district councils, but to unitary or unitaries. But there's a figure in it of £3 per elector per general election. That's not a figure that we recognise, that our finance department would recognise, you know, and actually it's the role of district councils to manage the elections for the county council. So the costs are the same whether you're one unitary or two, and the costs are the same per election. You set up a polling station no matter how many or how few people turn up. But the answer from PwC is it's a figure that is in the House of Commons library. So it doesn't recognise the assumptions are not assumptions about Worcester or Worcestershire. There's nothing in there about the actual financial deficit or about reserves of district councils, and it's missing. It doesn't reference the South Worcestershire Development Plan, and it's actually got the wrong information for the Joint Chief Executive. It isn't between Wyre Forest and Wychavon, as we know. So there are quite a lot of problems with the PwC report. David's mentioned the District Council Network Conference, which was on Thursday and Friday of last week. And in fact, all Worcestershire's District Council leaders and chief execs were at that meeting. And as David said, we had the opportunity to have a plenary session with Jim McMahon, the Minister, and also a separate one with Sharon Taylor, who's Minister for Local Government, might not be exactly the right title, but in the House of Lords. And I think, kind of on reflection, you might have assumed that, you know, District Council Network meeting will be full of moans, angst, and oh my God, we're all going to be done away with. What Jim McMahon said, and very much the kind of mood of the meeting, is it's up to us to be part of reshaping our future, shaping the relationships and shaping how we think local government should work and could work better. So no, there's no guarantee that the county council will listen to us, so to speak, but the fact that the letter on the 5th of February was specifically locality based, it went to all 7 Worcestershire leaders, was an attempt to level the playing field of power. And obviously, you know, going forward, it depends on the county council elections on the 1st of May. But absolutely, no, we need to be making the case. We know our areas, and there are absolutely opportunities which the current 2-tier format doesn't make use of, doesn't make the best of. And again, one of the sort of complaints, the criticisms I have of the PwC report is it's focused on population numbers which are flexible and of purely pound sign. You know, service transformation isn't just about reducing costs. It doesn't make any reference to economic areas. It doesn't make reference to housing need, sensible geography, social value, nothing about outcomes. And in conversations that I've had in the last month or so, there are partnerships, potential partnerships within Worcestershire where that opportunity, that conversation has never begun, and that we can do that. And it's going to be tricky, but this is a stage in the process. So thank you for all your contributions.
Thank you, and if we can move to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9, and this is review of the council's governance, and it's proposed by Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much, Chair, and a particular thank you to Sian, our monitoring officer, which is, the report gives a very kind of clear explanation and a summary of the decision that we have in front of us today. I think one of the absolutely kind of underlying theme. One of the important things is there's no point in meetings for meetings' sake. Last year, we approved the terms of reference for a review of governance arrangements. I think it's fair to say that with the publication of the English Devolution White Paper, pause for thought and actually what is an appropriate amount of effort to be put into the governance review of this council's arrangements. So this is the slimmed down version, and one of the key factors, the aims actually, is to improve the workload, both for us as members and in particular for officers. We do have a lot of meetings, and the content of those may be variable, and the shape of some of the meetings is due to elements of history, political history, shall we say. The Health and Wellbeing Committee was set up for particular reasons by the leadership at the time. It has proved a value in delivering some important projects and putting a focus on child poverty and food poverty. It's done some important pieces of work. I think now we have a clearer view of what the relationship should be and is between district councils and other parts of the health and wellbeing infrastructure, if I can put it that way. So in terms of relationships with the integrated care system, with the primary care network and with local partners. This is absolutely not about reducing the importance of health and wellbeing to this council or of our ability or commitment to improve people's lives. And I think the aim, an illustration of that, if you like, was the Communities Committee and kind of holding to account of platform housing last week. The importance of housing and housing conditions to health and well-being for our residents. So I think the aim is to have health and well-being actually as kind of a golden thread through all our decisions. We should always be thinking about our residents. And there's kind of a proposal in terms of what has been the functions for health and well-being to be divided between other committees. I think probably that's sufficient introduction.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And have Councillor Holmes to second.
Thank you, Chair. Sian's governance review was a fairly hefty report, even in council terms. It addressed most of the aspects of committee structures, making sound recommendations for change, most of which, unfortunately, were not embraced by the members. However, the group leaders felt that elements of the review should be enacted, as these efficiencies will reduce the amount of committee time and ease workload on officers and members alike. I'm pleased to second this motion.
Speakers? Okay, let me take them in order. Councillor Wilmore first.
I thoroughly enjoyed my time on Health and Wellbeing Committee. As an NHS physio and health researcher, it felt like a natural role as I made my entrance into council life. I've also very much enjoyed getting to know and working with Alina Round as chair, and also with the officers who've so diligently operationalised the work of the committee over the years. However, also as a member of Communities Committee, I can see the natural overlap, and I do think that this is a sensible move given the need to continue to run an effective, efficient and sustainable council. I would, however, like to think that the Health and Wellbeing Committee is not being abolished, as it states in the paper, but rather the ethos of the Health and Wellbeing Committee is being absorbed into every other committee. I've spoken several times in this chamber about the pressing need to address or mitigate the effects of health inequalities through the work of the City Council. The work of the Health and Wellbeing Committee was focused on this, including things like DWAS, physical activity schemes and the various grants on offer. I sincerely hope that health and wellbeing, particularly with respect to health inequality, is considered a golden thread that runs through all committees. For example, the Worcester Play Plan, as fantastic as it is, when written, did not take health inequality and socio-economic demographics into account. I would like to think that if the play plan were written again, it would, and hope that this is a consideration of all future plans developed in committees. I would also request that the relationships that have been built up with other agencies should continue to be nurtured by members, and the voice of the City Council must continue to be heard in those spaces, including the District Health Collaborative. The benefits of optimising health and wellbeing are manifold. These range from individual and neighbourhood benefits, but also have a wider effect on things like climate change. A trip to a primary care clinician that results in a prescription has a carbon footprint 3 times larger than one that doesn't. Every day spent in hospital results in 125 kilograms of carbon emission. The effects of mental health support to children in schools may last a lifetime and reduce the need for other council services as they progress through life. Addressing health and wellbeing should therefore be a keystone that spans and links all committees. So in conclusion, while the committee may cease to exist in a physical form, I urge chairs to embed the activity and ethos of the Health and Wellbeing Committee into their work and not view it now simply as a function of Communities Committee or an appendage to the usual workings of their current committees. Please embrace it, and please ensure works in progress like the Accessible Worcester project are seen to fruition. Thank you.
Councillor Wilmore, thank you. Councillor Gregson? Is it Councillor Gregson? No? Councillor Lamb, I do apologise. Please carry on. It's in that direction.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to make a note of caution. I'm glad to see. I know part of the point of the governance review is to ensure getting the balance right, thinking of officers' time and thinking of members' time. But I'm glad to see that it was rejected, the proposal to start meetings at 6 p.m. I know that was popular amongst some people, but once you bear in mind that most committees have a pre-meeting, which will take you to 5 p.m, it then does have an impact on the widening access of being a councillor to as many people as possible. I'm also a little bit concerned about point 3.9 on page 31 of Appendix 1, because it's saying that we're going to reduce the number of meetings per policy committee from 5 to either 3 or 4 per year. Now, there's a big difference there. I can see reducing it from 5. I wouldn't want to go any lower than 4, because as has just been said, because we're abolishing health and well-being and those functions are being absorbed by other committees, it means you can have more functions on a standard committee in less time. So I'm just a bit concerned that, you know, by having less meetings, I can understand the rationale behind it. There is the danger that we will be curtailing debate. We won't be able to, we'll have longer meetings, and we've all been there where we're in a meeting and it's 10 o'clock or even 10:30 at night, and there's still a couple of very, very worthy items at the end of the agenda, which we don't want to sort of give short thrift to be honest with you. So I do think, you know, if we're going to reduce the number of committees, no less than 4, and it might have the sort of positive side effect of ensuring greater discipline on both members, chairs and officers, because again, we've all been in committees where we've got a report which we've all read and then officers just almost read it verbatim for the next 20 minutes. And I think there has to be more of the assumption that we as councillors have done our pre-reading, and therefore the report is there, you know, for us to then talk about rather than just be regurgitated. So I think in a way, having less meetings will possibly ensure greater discipline. But I'm concerned. I wouldn't want to have just 3 meetings of Communities Committee. Otherwise, we'd be here until about 2 o'clock in the morning, to be honest with you.
Councillor Lamb, thank you. And also to mention at full council, the committee calendar will go for approval at that point. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. I fully welcome this report. I think it's balanced and it's very sensible. Just a couple of quick points. the Health and Wellbeing Committee, I noticed under paragraph 3.2, and quite rightly, it says it has very limited, the council has very limited statutory functions or service delivery directly related to health and well-being. Well, of course, this has always been the case, and it certainly was the case at the time it was set up. And when it was set up, it was done, shall we say, by the then leader of the council, who shall remain nameless, under highly contentious reasons. That's why it was set up. And I think the chickens have come home to roost. So I think the lesson is, I think we always need to be careful, Mayor, that we're not setting up committees looking into things for which we have no responsibility. And I think that's what the message is there. That's why I support this report. The other thing is just a question of the Standards Committee. It's only going to meet once a year. Do I assume there'll be a rush of applications for chairman?
Councillor Amos, thank you. And Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to build on the points made by Councillor Lamb, actually, about the frequency of the policy committees, and make a suggestion that perhaps the changes there should be workload-led, that each committee must have a plan of what it tackles, and that really should be the starting point for deciding on the frequencies, and some may be more frequent than others to reflect if there are differences in workload. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnersley, thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that the original committee system, as it was set up, had just 3 policy committees, and that seems to have mushroomed into 5. I'd like to echo this. I mean, obviously, a lot of the good points were made by many of the councillors. And I think that many of the topics that are covered in the Health and Wellbeing Committee will be adequately covered by the other committees. I think we do have to recognise that the amount of money we have as a council now is very much constrained, and we may not like it, but there are some things which are discretionary and some things that are statutory work, and I think it's very important that actually we've got to recognise that we cannot do everything, and there are only so many things we can do as a council. So I think we have to cut our cloth according to the money that we have, and unfortunately this might be one of those things we'd like to do, but maybe we cannot do this in this form in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen, thank you. Councillor Norfolk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome this report as well, and in particular paragraph 3.3, where we talk about moving disability access, which is very much a place consideration, into the Place and Economic Development Committee. There is discussion in here that the active travel work that the Health and Wellbeing Committee do moves to the Environment Committee, and I can understand why that is. I'd just like to add that PED is responsible for the city centre transport strategy, and that active travel forms a clear part of the transport strategy. And I think it would be more beneficial for active travel to move to PED. So I'd like to propose an amendment to the report that we do actually move active travel to PED.
So do we have a seconder for that?
I was going to second that from Environment Committee. I was really looking forward to active travel moving to Environment Committee. I think it's a really important issue, and particularly I have a real desire to make sure that walking gets really put forward as on an equal footing with cycling on the importance of active travel. That's because I walk everywhere and occasionally feel like a poor relation. However, I've had conversations with Councillor Norfolk, and she has convinced me that there is a strong link with the PED agenda. So I'm more than happy to second this and have it moved to there. I guess my main concern is to make sure that active travel is an important priority, and therefore, as long as it sits somewhere where we have a chair who's absolutely committed to driving this agenda forward, and I know the chair and vice chair of PED are great advocates of that, I'd be more than happy to second that and have that move. Slight loss to environment, but I think it would be in a happy place.
Councillor Cookson, thank you. So to see that's a move from environment to PED. Has everyone understood the amendment? Because it's verbal. Yeah, and would anyone like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Cooper, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As two members of Cycling UK's Women 100, I think there's lots of expertise within PED to be able to deal with this agenda, and I would very much welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any more speakers on the amendment? So just vote on the amendment. Yes, so if we're happy to vote on the amendment. Okay, so all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No. So that's unanimous. Do we have any more speakers on the rest of the report? Councillor Riaz, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those of us that were at the Communities Committee meeting last week witnessed how the first item, especially in terms of platform, how emotive, how passionate, how what a wonderful display of local democracy to a section of community in Worcester that would never normally engage with a democratic process that came through and filled the back gallery in terms of that. Everybody spoke across the board, spoke passionately in terms of that. And the amount of time that item, I think, nearly took 2 hours of our committee agenda in terms of that. So we have, in communities, we have a number of items which are extremely important to this to the whole city, whether we're holding WCT when they come and present their annual report, whether it's platform, or there is any other organisation that comes into there. The agenda on communities is extremely heavy. It affects the most vulnerable in our society, whether it's homelessness, whether it's those on social housing. It is an extremely big agenda. So my concern in terms of, obviously, naturally, with the removal of Health and Wellbeing Committee and the dispersal of different items into different committees, it's about obviously the amount of workload that is going to go into whoever's chairing that committee post-May in terms of that. So we could never do justice to the amount of items that we've got on the agenda in terms of the weighting. And one of the things that I've been consistently calling for in this governance review is some sort of weighting system in terms of importance on the agenda, so we can allocate an appropriate amount of time to an agenda items in accordance to the importance either through member voting or through public perception in terms of that. That gives us a guideline of how much time we need to spend on some of these items in order for us to ensure that we give them the adequate amount of time. Now we can't allocate 40 minutes to each item if we have a 10-item agenda. That would be physically impossible. And part of the problem with some of the suggestions reducing from 5 committees to 3 committees, that's practically impossible for us to cover and do justice to all the items that we're trying to protect from our public's perspective. So all the councillors that spoke passionately here this evening in terms of the increased workload on councillors has to be borne in mind in terms of the pressure that you're putting councillors under to make really important decisions within the limited amount of time and having more and more policies to go through, because we're only human. We get officer guidance. We're not professionals, a lot of us in the fields that we're doing, so we're trying to make decisions based on the reports that we've read and a bit of anecdotal evidence that we've managed to gather from our residents. So that's the danger with the proposals of the the governance review in terms of reduction of the committee system, and that is an inevitable fallout that people in the general public need to realise that's going to happen as a result of this. We will never be able to do fully justice to each and every item. We'll do our best, but naturally, because of the amount of time that we've got, we're not going to be able to cover it all.
Councillor Riaz, thank you. And Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I echo the point made about the Ford plan driving the workload, or remaining that be the main consideration about what weight or what allocation of meetings for committees. That Ford plan should not be skimmed down to accommodate a reduction in committee meetings. So the workload should be the prime driver. Perhaps one way around this might be more use of task and finish groups. And I absolutely endorse the reconsideration or reallocation of chair and vice chair roles of committees for political balance, thinking particularly about Communities Committee. Thank you.
Councillor Cross, thank you, and Councillor Agar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of what we've been talking about have been cross-cutting themes, and it's just more or less a matter of where to place them. Some of them relate to our city master plan. They're very important to us, and mention has been made of the golden thread. So we need to develop that quite strongly, I think. The quality and forward planning of what we do is going to have to be a bit better because of the reduction in capacity that we've got. That said, I'd just like to make a general comment about the committee system. I didn't want to move to it when we first did, but I've come to value it enormously. And there are various reasons, one of which is that all of the councillors, all of the backbenchers get involved. You know, we have that opportunity to actually put in our two penneth, if you want to put it that way. And I think we all do. And I think that doesn't really happen quite so much with the cabinet system. This is a much more democratic system, and I'm glad that we're hanging on to it, even if we have a reduced capacity. So I'm looking forward to quality and forward planning being the key to success here.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say on behalf of Worcester Green Party, express gratitude to both Councillor Round and Councillor Wilmore for chairing the Health and Wellbeing Committee meeting so effectively. So yeah, just want to say thank you in public.
Councillor Lawrenson, thank you. And I know Councillor Kinnison, you indicated to speak, but you have spoken already on this item, unfortunately. Do we have any more speakers? Have I missed anyone? No, all good. Okay, so if we can take that to the vote, all those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. That's unanimous. Okay, next we're moving on to agenda item 10, and we have 3 referral reports. And I would like to highlight at this point, these referral items have already been fully debated at the relevant committee meetings, and in particular policy and resources, which was just. So if we move on to agenda item 10.1, and that's the Simpler Recycling Report, and that's going to be proposed by Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, this has been, this is a referral from Environment Committee to P&R to full council, because it is about spending a substantial amount of money, and it's spending that money in order to buy the necessary equipment to implement domestic food waste collection next year. There is an amendment to the amount of money which wasn't available at Environment Committee. It's due to checking the calculations because it is quite complex in terms of the different bits of kit that are going to be needed. So the revised figure, which we did have at Policy and Resources yesterday, what we're looking for this evening is to approve capital expenditure of 336,000 for the procurement of food caddies and wheeled bins as set out within the report, and that will use the remaining £162,572 of DEFRA Capital New Burdens grant, so that figure's unchanged, but it is taking a bigger figure from the Service Transformation Reserve, so it'll be taking £173,428 from that reserve. This is a legal requirement to start collecting domestic food waste. It was actually under the last government and, if you like, has been confirmed under this government. So ask colleagues to approve this expenditure.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And we have Councillor Cookson to second.
Wasn't planning to speak much at full council tonight, and I seem to be pontificating quite a lot. I just wanted to say a little bit about food waste because I do think it's a really important thing. As a city, we really need to improve the amount of recycling that we do, and we also need to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. This actually supports the report that already came about food trucks, so it's just an extension of that. And I just wanted to make sure people were aware. The reason we're doing this now is that there's a time lag for procurement, and we need to actually act now, otherwise we're never going to actually get that up and running. This is a service that a lot of our residents really, really want. It's also something that is a statutory requirement. We did discuss at Environment Committee that there are a number of residents who don't want this, who have concerns about this, but hopefully we can win them over. And we did agree that we want to persuade and not enforce the importance of this. And for me, the most important thing about this is that actually there is no borrowing requirement. This is coming out of 2 different grant streams, but they are grant streams, so we're not putting the council at risk. But to also highlight that we haven't resolved the issue of the revenue funding, but that is an argument for another day. If we are committed to be that forward-thinking council who is going to do a food waste service, we really need to make sure that we are purchasing the infrastructure, we've got the procurement in place so that we can actually get there. We are going to miss the deadline, there's no doubt about that, but just because the time scale, so that's why it's important to do this now. So I'd really urge people to support this.
Councillor Cookson, thank you. And obviously this has been debated in full before, but I think Councillor Amos, you would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a few points. I really think we as a council should really make a point to central government that if they're going to impose new requirements on us, they should properly fund them. They know damn well that they are deliberately underfunding this provision. So it's now going to cost the people of Worcester a third of a million when we've got all sorts of crises and problems to resolve. And I frankly don't think that many people would think this is a priority, but it's become a priority because we're now being asked to find a third of a million to set up a scheme that some gormless Conservative cabinet member thought up a couple of years ago, and unfortunately the Labour government's gone along with when they could have stopped it. So, you know, and also I will have a question. This, of course, is for capital, but I'd love to know what the revenue implications of this scheme are, because when I ask for more litter bins and dog bins and things, I'm often told, well, we're at capacity, so we can't provide any more. Now, all of a sudden, we're having an extra bin collection, but it's going to go ahead. So what are the revenue implications? And I think also, Chair, Mayor, I would just respectfully suggest that the title, Simpler Recycling, when you're going to introduce another bin on the pavement, a new bin in the house, it's not actually simpler, it's an expensive waste of money. And the reason I say that, Mayor, is because if you look at paragraph 2.8 on page 38, and this is the crux of my concern, and I don't think anybody's thought of this. We've just been talking about health and well-being. What is now saying, it is expected that this caddy will be kept internally within the home, so it provides an easily accessible container to dispose of food waste, i.e. kept in the kitchen or in a utility room. Incidentally, not every house has a utility room, but let's assume that they do, even though they don't. So what this proposal is suggesting, Chair, is that you're going to have smelly, decomposing flesh, vegetables, and goodness knows what in this bin, stuck in your house for at least a week until it can be collected. Unless I've completely misunderstood, but you can tell from my shape, I tend not to leave food. I tend to eat it, so it's not a problem in my household. But the point is, Mayor, the final point is this, that this is going to mean another bin outside, another bin for collection, and now another bin inside. And I do very much think that this is a grotesque waste of money. It is not something the public are demanding, and to do it at this time is really stupid, and I'm very disappointed this government has gone along with it when they could have, stopped Gove's Gormless Act in its tracks by saying we're not going to go ahead with it.
Councillor Amos, thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The contribution from Councillor Amos is entirely justified why I've made notes for this item. I know we've discussed it before, but that's completely justified why I'm going to say what I'm about to say. The only thing that I agree with what you've just said is about the timing of this. I do agree with that, the angst about that. So what I'm going to say is in support of the recommendation. There's a bit of a preamble and I'll end with a question. Page 5, Appendix 4.2 says that this council is committed to providing an equitable service to all households and wishes to divert as much food waste as possible from the residual waste stream to increase its recycling rates. Amen to that. A famous Green Party policy, and finally we're there. On the 13th of August 2013, I went to Abingdon with 3 councillors from this council to learn more about the Vale of Whitehorse District Council's food waste collection. We were informed that food waste is collected from over 106,000 households, which is approximately 56,000 in South Oxfordshire and 50,000 in the Vale of Whitehorse. And that's over 9,540 tonnes of food waste were collected each year. In the 2011-12, the Vale of Whitehorse achieved a 68.7% combined recycling, reuse and composting rate for the year, and in South Oxfordshire it was 67.9%, which meant that those 2 councils were ranked 1 and 2 in the National DEFRA League tables. The Strategic Director with responsibility for waste and recycling at South Oxfordshire and Vale of Whitehorse District Council said this: "We are very proud of what we have achieved. We set an aspirational target of 55% recycling by 2020, and we hit that within the first month. The recycling rate has gone a lot higher. It's gone up a lot higher than we ever expected, which is brilliant. If you are brave with a contract, it will deliver results. With change, there will always be some resistance, but you do get results." So this council commissioned a food waste report at my request in 2013, but despite the benefits I've just mentioned, it decided not to introduce a food waste collection in Worcester, which is why I agree with Councillor Amos's point about the timing of this. We could have done this 12 years ago. The Conservative Cabinet Member for Finance for the Vale of Whitehorse District Council emphasised that food waste is a resource, and he said that the food waste service works like a dream. Those were his very words, which is partly due to, and the council received an award for its communication campaign, which leads me to my question. Can this council receive an assurance that the revenue budget will include an allocation for a communication strategy so that Worcester residents will be encouraged to separate their food waste and help to increase recycling rates? Thank you for bearing with me.
Councillor Lawrenson, thank you. Councillor Pingree.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Lawrenson has very much already said what I was going to say, but just to echo his points that really we should have been doing this earlier, and I agree with that. At the moment, all of the food waste that we put into the bins gets sent to an incinerator. Food waste is something like 70% water. We're spending a lot of money burning water, and it would be nice to finally stop doing that, essentially, and try and get something back from our food waste, which is, as you've said, a resource.
Councillor Pingree, thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I just wish to seek clarification, please, that the only figures being amended are in, could this please be clarified? Paragraph 2.3, instead of 310,000, we're looking at 336,000. And in the table under 2.18, the Worcester City Council spend, the indicative cost per unit of the 7-litre compostable caddies is £1.86 for the roll, and so a total spend of 30,000 instead of £936. Are those the only figures that are changing?
Yeah, Councillor Denham, could you just confirm or just sum up? I think it was.
I mean, the headline figures are, as you say, it's in paragraph 2.3 that the figures have changed. That is probably as a result of a miscalculation within the table of 2.18. I haven't been given the corrected figure for within that table, but what, you know, we're looking for, what P&R agreed last night is the figures that I read out, and that is what we're asking council to agree to. So it's about the capital spend to buy the caddies and the, you know, the other domestic things, to buy the things within that paragraph 2.18.
Councillor Denham, thank you. I think, Sean, can I just get
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I can just confirm that the recommendation includes the corrected numbers, approves capital expenditure of 336,000, and the sources of that, we refer to the DEFRA Capital New Burdens Grant, that figure is accurate, and then we say 173,428 from the Service Transformation Reserve. And to Councillor Cross's question about what was the error in relation to the cost of the food caddy liners, that has been recalculated. The actual cost is £30,034. So the two amended figures in the recommendation are now 336,000 and 173,428. Thank you.
Thank you. I think next we have Councillor Agar.
Thank you. I take Councillor Lawrenson's point. We could have done this 12 years ago, but what on earth would the county council have done with that waste? Because, you know, they're still burning it. And I hope the forthcoming unitary gets a grip of waste management. You know, I visited a few anaerobic digesters when I was on the county council, and they're quite small things. There was a time when they were blowing up, but they don't anymore. The ones I saw really powered greenhouses and stuff like that. I've seen nothing to say that the county council is going to have a huge or a whole constellation of anaerobic digesters to make use of this waste as energy, or is it going to put it into composting? But whichever it decides to do, I think it needs to do better. And I do hope the unitary does do better.
Councillor Agar, thank you. And Councillor Gregson.
Thanks, Mayor. This is not the Environment Committee, so I don't understand why we're going through all this again. But my point was purely about policy in relation to what has been agreed by the council or not agreed by the council, as raised by one of the previous speakers about what happened 12 years ago, which I know about because I was involved directly with it. And the situation was accepted that the county council would fail to deliver on its obligations to support any kind of disposal of food waste. The costs were therefore prohibitive, and the council agreed unanimously, including the councillor aforementioned, that we were not able to proceed at that time due to the financial situation.
Councillor Gregson, thank you. Do we have Councillor Jagger?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question. We're obviously spending a great deal of money on buying equipment. I just want some reassurance that as we move to unitary authority, we're not going to have to buy new bins or have to relabel them, because that's not very far away. So are there any plans in place to make sure that we don't have to do that?
I think anything with the future unitary, that's not within our gift to answer, unfortunately, but yeah, good question. Okay, do we have any more speakers? Okay, let's move to the vote. So all those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? So that's carried. Thank you. Next, if we move on to 10.2, it's the referral report again from P&R on its capital and investment strategies 25-26 and 27-28, and it's proposed by Councillor Denham. People want a quick. Oh yes, sorry. Do we? Yeah. We can. Would anyone like a 5-minute break or 10-minute comfort break? Yeah. Yeah. It is 9 o'clock. I can't see the clock very well for me. Okay. Yeah. All back in 10 minutes. Thank you. In resources, capital and investment strategies.
Julian's just getting the...
Okay, just 2 seconds.
Read on.
Right. Okay, yes, if we can return to item 10.2 and Councillor Denham to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a referral from Policy and Resources Committee that, so capital and investment strategies 2025 to 2028. This is an annual, a strategy that comes annually to Council. Obviously, each year it's about taking account of the present financial circumstances for the Council and for the wider economy, the cost of borrowing. Within this paper is a slight resetting of the authorised limits. There's also new kind of guidance around the flexible use of capital receipts and the flexible management of the capital programme. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial in it. It's a strategy that the Council requires. Any difficult financial questions need to be posed to our new Corporate Director for Finance and Resources.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Gregson, thank you. And would you like to speak or reserve your right to
I just formally thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further speakers on this item? No. Councillor Mays?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight there is one point in this report that I think should be highlighted and made aware to all members, which is normally we are not allowed to use capital receipts to pay for revenue costs, but we have a dispensation through to 2030 to do so for certain expenses, including transformation costs. Now, we've never previously used that power, but this year, for the first time in this report, we will be using it, putting £500,000 towards staff redundancy costs. Now, I would highlight, as I mentioned earlier, about funding of all local government, that if the Labour government properly funded this council, then we could be spending those capital receipts on something more useful, like St Martin's Gate solar panels, rather than making staff redundant. Thank you.
Councillor Mace, thank you. Any further speakers? Okay, if we move to the vote, all those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, next we move to referral report. We've got agenda item 10.3, and it's the review of the council's procurement code. My words out. It's proposed by Councillor Lynn Denham.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a legal update in light of the Procurement Act 2023, which came into force on the 24th of February 2025. It's about the legal framework for the use of public money and ensuring that that's done in an open and rigorous fashion. It includes measures against corruption, bribery and conflicts of interest. Specific kind of policy initiatives would be chosen or decided for procuring specific items. This is about the legal code, the overarching process around procurement of any item. And some items are significantly larger than others, and some are quite small, but the council still needs to buy them.
Councillor Denham, thank you. I think I have Councillor Stevens a second.
Yes, I formally second this motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Okay, if we move to the vote, all those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? So that's unanimous, that's carried. Thank you. And if we move to agenda item 11, report from the leader of the council on any matters which they are of the opinion require urgent consideration.
I have one item of AOB in that we've received a message this evening that Malvern Hills Council has unanimously agreed to the interim local government reorganisation plan. So that's an update hot off the press. Wychavon Council are meeting tomorrow.
Councillor Denham, thank you. I believe we have no other items of business, no exempt issues, and so I would like to close the meeting. Thank you.